Welcome back to Koine Corner. Today we're going to talk about lexeme. Lexeme is the basic unit of meaning given to all the words that share the same root, the same base form of a word. Many years ago, before I even started studying Koine, I heard a famous radio talk show host utter three profound yet simple words. He said, "Words mean things." And I've come to understand through the years that the only way for people to have meaningful conversation is if they share a vocabulary. For example, if you and I are standing looking into a field, and in that field we see a horse, and you call it a horse, but I call it a snowblower, our conversations have the potential to get very confusing. If we both call it a snowblower, at least we know what we're talking about. But if one of us calls it a horse and the other calls it a snowblower, and a third person comes along and says, "That's not a snowblower, that's a food processor," and then a fourth person comes along and says, "That's a pterodactyl," we can't have meaningful discourse while we each define things individually. So let's start with the premise that words mean things, and we'll carry on with today's exploration. We're taking a look today in John chapter 1, verse 17. And let's take a look in Koine. The first phrase, there's two phrases in the sentence. The first phrase in Koine says, "Hoti honomos dia moosios edothe." And so each word, we'll break them down. The first one, hoti, is because or for. Then honomos is the law. Dia is through. Mouseos is a genitive of Moses. And then edothe means was given. So the first clause is for the law through Moses was given. Let's look at the second clause. He charis kai he aletheia dia Jesu Christu egeneto. So he charis is grace, the grace. It's got the article in front of it telling us that it's talking about specific grace, not just grace as a concept, but a particular grace. Kai and he aletheia, the truth. So the grace and the truth. Dia, through again, just like with Moses. Jesu Christu, Jesus Christ, in a genitive to match up with dia. And then egeneto. Egeneto means came into being or happened. So the full translation of the verse would be, for or because the law through Moses was given. And now I'm going to supply a but, because there's a contrast in the two phrases, but the text doesn't have the but. But grace and truth through Jesus Christ came into being. All right, let's talk lexeme. Let's take a look at the two words that are particularly important to us today, and they are edothe and egeneto. So in talking about Moses and the giving of the law, John told his audience that the law was given through Moses, was given edothe. It's a passive aorist verb, which means it was passive, meaning the action was done to the law. The law was given through Moses. Egeneto is, and that comes from the verb didomi. Didomi means I give. So the lexeme, the root of this is this didomi, I give. The next verb, egeneto, comes from ginomai, and it means I come into being or I come to pass, I happen. And so first we were told that the law was given through Moses, and then we're told grace and truth came into being through Jesus Christ. So let's look at the stark difference in those two verbs. Moses is described as an agent. The subject of his clause, of his phrase, is honomos, the law. So the law is the subject. Moses is an agent through whom the law is given. Given to whom? Given to the people, right? If we go back and think about the story, Moses goes up the mountain, meets with God. God puts the law on tablets of stone with his own finger, gives them to Moses. Moses comes down and passes the law on to the people. So how did God give the law to the people? He gave it to the people through Moses. But then we look at this very different situation. We're told that Jesus became, or let me rephrase, the grace and truth, the subject of his clause, became or came into being through Jesus Christ. It wasn't given. Jesus didn't come and hand grace and truth to the people. Jesus became the embodiment, the incarnation of grace and truth. If we think back earlier in the paragraph, in verse 14, it starts off with hologos sarx ageneto. The word became flesh. Sarx is flesh. So the same verb, the word became flesh, ageneto, is used here when we're told that grace and truth through Jesus Christ, ageneto, came into being. So there's a pretty big difference here. Jesus is not the agent of God to bring grace and truth, to give grace and truth, like Moses was with the law. Jesus is the embodiment of grace and truth through the incarnation. The Word became flesh, ageneto, in both verses. So why does this lexeme matter? Why does the word difference matter? Well, think about it like this for a moment. If John had written this verse, which wasn't a verse when he wrote it, that happened later, but if when John wrote this sentence, he used the same verb for both, if he used didomi for the law and for grace and truth, then Moses is the agent who gave the law to the people on God's behalf. And if he used didomi about Jesus, then Jesus Christ is the agent who gave grace and truth to the people. But he didn't do that. He chose one verb, didomi, for Moses giving the law, an agent, and he chose ageneto, ginomai, that grace and truth came to the people through the incarnation when the Word became flesh, ageneto, again, ginomai. Jesus became the embodiment, the incarnation, the living, breathing, walking, and talking soul of grace and truth. It's quite a different thing. What if John had used ginomai about both parties? Then Moses would not be the agent through whom God gave the people the law. Moses would also be an embodiment. The law would have come into being through Moses. That makes Moses not an agent. That makes Moses much more of either an embodiment or he becomes the law giver rather than the conduit through which the law is given. So why does any of this matter? It's the big so what question that I always like to ask. Well, let's go back to the beginning. Words mean things, and authors, when they're trying to convey meaning, speakers, when they're trying to convey meaning, have a vast array of words available to them. Always look at the words that were chosen, as well as the words that weren't chosen, to help figure out what the intended meaning was. What was John trying to get to his readers in the Gospel of John? He wanted them to know that there was a difference between Moses and Jesus. One was an agent through whom God communicated the law. The other is the embodiment of God's grace and truth, walking, talking, living, and breathing on earth. It's a pretty big difference. And it all comes down to the lexeme. It comes down to the root meanings of those two words, didomi and ginomai. Well, that's it for today, and I hope that was beneficial to you, and if it was, I hope you'll subscribe, share, like, do all those other good things that keep YouTube channels moving and shaking. And until we see one another again, charis kai arene humin, grace and peace to you.